Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and unscripted. The eyebrows, see, those were not scripted. Today we're talking again about Elizabeth Warren and her relationship to the Democratic National Committee. Brian Fallon says, fall in love in the primary, fall in line in the general. And that sums up how the DNC looks at humans. But the humans who are paying attention, especially independent humans who don't have any allegiance to the Democratic Party, they're not going to go with that. And without those people, the DNC is going to lose again. So that's a good introduction. Now, I'll remind you about Crystal Ball, what she said about Elizabeth Warren. She said that Elizabeth Warren intends to carry on the tradition of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, which means really she's carrying on the tradition of Ronald Reagan and both Bushes, and even to some extent, to be totally fair, Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon. That's what we've been having, and that's what we'll continue to have, according to Crystal and others, if we have Elizabeth Warren, the faux aggressive. All right, so that was just a reminder. This is Crystal right here. She is really on top of things. She's really at the center of what we need to be looking at with regard to the Democratic National Committee. Here's David Dole. He has a little blurb about Elizabeth.
We have to be honest with what she appears to be doing here. So this report out of the New York Times. What Elizabeth Warren is quietly telling Democratic insiders. With phone calls, texts, and handwritten notes, the Massachusetts senator is continuing an unusually determined outreach effort to show party officials she is aligned with them. Now, look, I'm going to be as objective as possible here. On one hand, this is great strategy. I mean, courting party insiders, forming relationships with the Democratic leaders. Essentially here she's aiming for superdelegates. So if it went down to a contest between her and somebody else, she would, I guess, use those relationships to try and get superdelegates on her side if it went to a second ballot where superdelegates could actually vote.
But they're evil!
And on top of that, it just helps to have the support of Democratic insiders throughout all these different states.
They're evil,
but on the other
David.
hand,
they're evil.
This approach clearly has an impact on not even Warren's willingness, but anybody's willingness, any candidate doing this, it will have an impact on their willingness to fight for the average person.
Yes.
So when you are courting these Democratic insiders, you're forming these relationships, you're having these private meetings with them, that's going to impact your worldview. Even if it's not consciously, then subconsciously. Your environment impacts you. It's human nature. More from New York Times. Yet publicly, and even more in private, she is signaling to party leaders that, far from wanting to stage a political revolution in the fashion of Mr. Sanders, she wants to revive the beleaguered Democratic National Committee and help recapture the Senate while retaining the House in 2020. Now again, this is something to the average the average reader may sound great. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wants to revive the DNC without having a political revolution, and she wants to, win the Senate, retain the House. Here's the problem.
Here's the problem.
You are not going to do these things, or at least not do them for long, without that political revolution.
There you go. You're only just going to keep the frogs in the pot simmering. The DNC isn't going to fix it. And so courting the DNC insiders is not going to fix it. And they're evil. They're freaking evil. Tim Black.
That amount of fawning, everyone's
fawning. He was pointing out really pandery, fawning coverage of Elizabeth Warren in the media, and he sees that as a signal because the Democratic Party connected to the talent agencies, connected to the thought leaders, as we've talked about earlier. All of these are signs that the Democratic leadership, the think tank leadership, the media, they're all connected at the lip. They're all on the side of Elizabeth Warren. So that's what he's talking about here with fawning.
Fawning over Elizabeth Warren. Wow, she's running. Yeah, when I start seeing stuff like that, that makes me really, say, hey, the establishment really must like Elizabeth Warren. I mean, whole segment was about positivity about Elizabeth Warren. I told you they made her the chosen one, man. They've decided. But Tim, that's not enough. That's just one stupid commercial. One, wasn't supposed to be a commercial. It's actually a segment in a leading cable news provider. But, it was just one segment, Tim. What else you got? You got to have more than that, Tim. Stop being such a...
And he does. He has a lot of evidence, as does Crystal, as does Nico, and David, and Graham. There are a lot of the people I've been following and showing to you. Why am I doing this anyway? It's because there's an embargo on this news getting out. And so all of these small voices saying things to you and agreeing with each other and showing you, especially today we're going to talk about Caitlyn Johnstone. I wish she had a video because it'd be fun to put her words to a face, but her words are extremely powerful on this topic. Once we get all these small voices lined up, if we can get the people to share this message broadly, that Elizabeth Warren is probably the biggest threat to a revolution that we face, bigger by far than Biden, who is just Hillary light, not even light. Now, he's Hillary on steroids, and Warren is Hillary light. And Caitlyn Johnstone says all this very well. Her article is where I got this position, really. This is the DNC position. Fall in love in the primary, fall in line in the general, like we're all good soldiers. And she offers Susan Sarandon as an example. I was just talking about Susan yesterday and hoping that she would stand up because she has a big enough voice that we could finally break the embargo and get the word out about Bernie or bust, and the fact that he's the only person who could possibly win against Donald Trump in a general election. And then she talks about the vapid origins of the drama, the little spat that happened and got blown out of proportion. But I'll skip to the chase. Her bottom line is that it's a good thing that the media elites are attacking Susan and others who won't fall in line. As Brian Fallon says, we won't do that. Even Joe Biden's wife is trying to get us to fall in line. And there's a hyper-aggressive escalation in this battle. And Caitlyn concludes that that's a good thing because now the fight is out in the open and we can just fight nastily if we need to, but we're not being ignored. They're not pretending that Bernie can't win. Once they get into the mode that Bernie probably could win or probably will win, they're going to go nuts. And there's another article, I'm going to put both of them in, of Caitlyn. Here's a quote from the second article that I'll link to underneath this video. This is hugely significant. The entire imperial oppression machine is held together with aggressive plutocratic propaganda. That was a nice sentence. And the aggressive plutocratic propaganda is coming through the machinery of corporate news. She says, the ability of the ruling class to manipulate the way people think, act, and vote is the only thing stopping the public from using the power of their numbers to force real changes. For example, to stand up and have labor strikes or Occupy Wall Street movements and things like that. And create a new system that is not built upon endless war, ecocide, and exploitation. The mass media propaganda engine is now at its weakest and most vulnerable point ever, and the narrative manager's attempts to regain control are only exposing them more severely. So even regular Americans who only get their news on television are going to say, hey, wait a minute, why are they screaming their heads off? Even, and the last thing I'll say, even some seasoned veteran commentators and Noam Chomsky, the great Noam Chomsky, are saying, no, this is real. The media bias against Bernie Sanders is real. Bernie is right to criticize the Washington Post. and so on. So these are big voices saying this. This is going to expose and unravel the corporate media establishment. Let's hope it happens soon enough and that people are paying attention. All right, have another slurp of coffee. Hope your day gets started well. See you tomorrow.